welcome back to my channel. If you are new here and like the video, be sure to hit the like and subscribe button for more content. Thank you for watching.
Wow, I'm not going to lie and say that I did not expect that type of reaction, but y'all really came after me. Anyways, this is the alternative ending of whatever the heck happened earlier this week. This is also something I would like to call a butterfly effect. Although it's sorta is and sorta isn't, you'll see. I'm sorry that I'm dying. With his last dying thought, he thought of marriage vows, which are cringy, but at the moment, it gave him peace. I love you, SakuAtsu. Even after death does us part. He took in one last breath before he gave into his eternal rest. Kita stood up and walked up towards the driver to ask what was going on when he caught a glimpse of something in the corner of his vision. The peeking sun reflected off the glass bottle that was nearly empty. He recognized the logo because it's the same drink his grandmother would have to unwind after a certain long day at the farm.
Stop this bus!
Kita's outburst made everyone snap up, curious at all of the commotion being made, especially from their level-headed captain. Eden stood up, wondering why his own lover was yelling. Even Suna sat up, sleep being the last thing on his mind. Atsumu glanced at his twin, feeling familiar panic that Autumn always brought up. The younger returned a look that told him that everything would be fine, but for once, he wasn't so sure. There was another violent tug on the bus whenever the driver had passed out from his drunken stupor. Atsumu paused. This had happened before. He's seen it. Felt it. He wasn't sure how, but he knows Kita will fail to catch control of the wheel and the bus will flip. He knows that everyone on this bus will die. He couldn't let that happen. He pushed his fear down in the back of his throat and glanced toward his brother, whose petrified glance reminded them of when they were kids. Osamu would come up to his bed, crying, convinced he'd seen a monster. It would of course freak Atsumu out, but they stuck together. The setter stood up from his seat. Tsumu? If this fails, take care of Kiyomi. What are you... Spiker reached for his twin, but the blonde was already far out of reach.
Atsumu!
Before Kita could grab a hold of the wheel, the starter pushed him back into Eden's lap and threw the passed-out bus driver from the seat who conveniently wasn't wearing a seatbelt before he popped into the seat and grabbed a hold of the wheel. He'd never driven a car before, let alone a bus, but he knew the basics. He pressed his foot harshly onto the brake pedal and steadied the wheel. The leaves on the ground still made it impossible not to crash, but it definitely saved them a couple of flips.
Hold on!
Everyone braced themselves, holding onto the metal bars underneath their seats for dear life, and the bus flipped onto its side and slid across the asphalt a few meters before it came to an immediate halt. Glass and luggage was everywhere. Everyone that was seated on the left side of the bus was thrown onto the right, where the ground now was. Kita rose up, feeling a sharp shard of glass wedged underneath his shoulder blade, before checking Eden, whose only major injury was a concussion from the looks of it. Kita stood up, examining the scene of disaster, finding his teammates one by one poking their heads over the flipped seats. Osamu, wake up! Kita shot his head in that direction and ran that way, ignoring the pain in his shoulder. Osamu groaned, opening his eyes, seeing his lover panicked. He sat up, with Suna barely catching him from knocking his head against the chair leg that was miraculously still holding up. His back was killing him. Suna was still in his arms during the wreck, so Asumu took the brunt of the hit for them, with his back hitting the ground. Seeing that he was alright, Kita turned towards the driver's seat, remembering the person that saved them all. "How's Sumu?" The spiker asked his captain, but Kita didn't respond. "Kita-san, where's Atsumu?" He was getting more impatient, but the captain truly didn't have an answer. The driver's seat was empty, and there was a gaping hole through the windshield, enough for one person to crash in through.
Where is my brother?
Asumu stood up despite his boyfriend's protest and walked out of the bus, stumbling along the way.
Samu, wait!
Suna ran after him, but didn't once interfere once the setter was found, unmoving and surrounded in a pool of his own blood. The middle blocker gasped and sunk to his knees, watching his lover run towards his twin. After hearing someone call for an ambulance, Asumu dared to check if his brother was even breathing. He was scared. He didn't want to think what would happen if Atsumu really was gone. He didn't think he would be able to bear it. He started sobbing, reaching a trembling hand out and grabbing his twin's bloodied one. You're gonna be okay. You have to hold on. Please, don't leave me, Sumu. Suna grabbed Asumu's phone that was in his own pocket and dialed SakuAtsu's number. He didn't expect him to pick up, so froze on the spot whenever he did. What do you want, Mia? What was he supposed to say? How could he even admit the words aloud? Immediately, he instantly regretted calling the ace. Hello? Suna stifled a sob and covered his mouth with his hand once more. Asumu? What's going on? He sucked in a shaky breath and spoke. It's Suna. He had so many questions and didn't even know where to begin. Are you crying? The loud sobs seemed to have answered his question. Where is Osamu? Suna sniffled. He's next to me. Can he come to the phone? Suna glanced at the silver hair spiker in a worse state than him. I don't think so. What about Atsu? The raven's voice broke, looking at the spoken setter still not moving or waking. He could hear SakuAtsu on the other line rushing out the door. Where are you? In truth, he didn't have a definite answer, but had a rough estimation. We didn't make it far, just past the school. While Suna was conversing with SakuAtsu, Eden dashed up towards the twins, diving on his bare knees, and pressed 2 fingers against the groove of his neck where his artery was, and waited. And waited. And waited. And waited. Yet, he got nothing. Eden? The ace's breath hitched. It couldn't be. There was no pulse. He was certified in CPR and had well enough experience and knowledge on how to bring someone back to life and keep them that way until paramedics arrive, but those were strangers. Never once was it someone he knew, precious Atsumu of all people. Kita, I need a cloth. He had to do something about the blood. He was losing too much. Kita immediately ran to the bus, where he grabbed a shirt from a busted open suitcase.
Wait, what's going on?
Asumu sniffled, looking at Eren, who put his hands together and began compressing his hands onto his twin's chest. Asumu went to stop him, in disbelief of what was happening and what was going on. His twin brother wasn't dead. Suna held his lover back so that Eren could keep him alive.
We are losing him.
Asumu sucked in a deep breath, with wide-blown silver eyes peering down in horror at his other half as the crimson red from his body was spreading down into the earth. This couldn't be possible. Death was never an option he was willing to accept for his twin. They were so young, so the possibility that one of them would die was anything but the present. Yet, he didn't have the willpower in him to fight. Watching his captain apply pressure onto Atsumo's gaping side, or his upperclassmen pushing air into his brother's lungs that were aching for oxygen. He was scared. Asumu was scared. This wasn't like his fears when he was a child going to his twin's bedside, crying about some monster underneath his bed. This was a fear that he had deep down, but never had the courage to accept. The fear of his twin dying, of watching him die right in front of him. Losing Atsumu was equivalent as to the sun falling from the sky. There could be no life without the sun, the light, the source of all life. All source of hearing, feeling, and senses began to feel numb. He couldn't see what was happening to his brother, or the smell of the horrid blood of his brother's blood, or even Suna holding him close to sobbing into his shoulder. It was all incoherent. He couldn't even hear the sirens that were once far off into the distance suddenly appear so close, or when the ace of an Tachiyama ran to Atsumu's side with his own blood running cold at the sight of his beloved. The paramedics rushed to the scene just as Atsumu opened his eyes with sweat beading down his brow.
Tsumu!
Omi. His voice was hoarse and barely had the strength to produce any noise. But upon hearing that beautiful melody that was Asato's voice, everyone turned to him.
Atsumu!
Kita crouched to the ground and rubbed his hand across his forehead, letting out a breath he didn't even know he was holding. Eren muffled some sobs of his own, wiping the smaller's blood with trembling hands with someone's clothes that flew out of the bus. But just as quickly as he woke up, he found himself slipping away once more. Sir? Sir, you need to stay awake. They placed him onto a stretcher, placing a ventilator over his mouth, but during all of this, Atsumu couldn't help but smile. One life, everyone died. In this one, everyone is alive, while it seems that he died in both. He let his head drop to the side, gluing his eyes onto his twin and lover for one last time before he shut his eyes once more. The raven had a mask over his nose, trying to block the smell of blood that seemed to linger in the waiting room. Most of the team got off with minor injuries and went home, ultimately deciding on canceling the training camp. The only ones that stayed were Asumu, Suna, Eren, and Kita. SakuAtsu couldn't help but notice how the ace's hands had a slight tremble while his leg was bouncing up and down, and the captain was biting at his nails with his own eyes glued to the floor. You care about him. The couple looked up at SakuAtsu with tear-filled eyes. Of course we do. He is a close friend. That's not what I meant. Osama looked up at the two boys that he looked up to. Do you like my brother? They both immediately shot an apologetic look towards Sakusa for even thinking it was okay to feel that way towards his boyfriend. Look. They were interrupted with a nurse walking up to them. Are you boys here for SakuAtsu? Osama was the first to jump out of his chair and walk towards the startled nurse.
How is my brother?
Suna grabbed a hold of his lover's arm, a silent way of telling him to calm down. The nurse smiled warmly and pulled out his clipboard, flipping through some papers before he found the final diagnosis. Don't worry, he is just fine. We were able to get him stable. Right now, he just needs to focus on resting and healing. Osama fell to his knees, feeling hot, fresh tears of relief stream down his cheeks. Thank you. What all is wrong? Well, Mr. Meow was super fortunate. An accident like that could have resulted in spinal cord injury, brain damage, or even death. It seems like he has some torn ligaments and muscles, broken bones, a concussion, and deep lacerations. The nurse turned towards Eren and Kita. If you two boys didn't perform CPR or prevent bleeding, your friend most certainly would have died. You bought your friend time and saved his life. Sakusa looked back at the two, having conflicting feelings. He shouldn't feel this way. Kita broke down, relieved that he did something good. It was true he didn't know where he stood as far as how he felt about the setter, but there wouldn't have been a way to figure it out if he was gone. He didn't want him to be out of reach. He'd rather be friend-zoned and him alive than be in love with him and him dead. That fate would be unbearable. Sakusa had never felt more panicked whenever he received the call from a sobbing Suna. He could hear everything, sobs, screams, pained groans in the background. That moment he heard that his Atsumu was hurt and gone, took his breath away. He lost all sense of direction and couldn't figure out which way was up or down, left or right. It was as if he was levitating in a motionless void with no bottom and no top. For all he knew, he could have been walking on the walls and wouldn't have even known. His mind became a fuzzy mess, and even began to question if he were still asleep and he would wake up to find Atsumu rushing around his room, running late for the bus to take him to training camp. That would have been a much preferable fate. He wanted someone to tell him that those words Suna spoke were nothing but a bitter lie, and just maybe this was just a foul prank. He didn't want to say goodbye and let him leave. Walking into the room, all smooth right on his tail, he saw the older twin still, lying in the bed with tubes and wires all over the place. The sight was horrifying, but it kept him alive, and that was more than what he could ask for. He was still asleep, so the only sight of him actually being alive was his chest that was slowly rising up and down, and the steady beep on the heart monitor. Both Osamu and Sakusa were seated on either side of the blonde's bed, relieved to see that while his eyes were still closed, they didn't reveal prominent pain. The ace snuck a peek towards the two older players who stood awkwardly in the room, almost afraid to approach Atsumu, of maybe even both of them. Sakusa sighed. They saved his lover's life. Besides, this wasn't a time to be petty. The best thing he could do was give them a chance. Kiyomi scooted over on the bench he was seated and waved his hand over at the two, who looked up in surprise. Come on. Atsu would want you near when he wakes up. Eden flashed a soft smile, which made a tiny hint of a rosy shade appear on his cheeks that were likely covered with his mask, all before they sat down, not too close, wanting to respect the boundaries. Look, SakuAtsu, do you like him? They both looked back at the setter and his twin, who turned his attention to them. Yes, we do. SakuAtsu nodded his head. Both of you? Yeah. You two are still together, right? Both of them nodded, unconsciously reaching for each other's hand. The ace sat back, realizing his lover wasn't waking up anytime soon, and looked towards the ceiling. You know, Atsu recently told me that he had no future. He just couldn't see one. All of them stared at the raven with horrified eyes. What do you mean? I'm not too sure myself. He wasn't really making sense. It was as if he were speaking to some alternative self rather than me. But, seeing everything that happened, I'm almost positive that this is what he meant. Asuma squeezed his brother's hand. Are you saying... Yes, I'm pretty sure that Atsumu was supposed to die. The entire room was silent. The only thing that was heard was the heart monitor and Kita's singular shuddered breath. But he didn't. SakuAtsu lifted his head from a strained position that gazed mindlessly towards the ceiling. Atsumu didn't die, and he won't. He is strong. He wouldn't let anything kill him, not even fate or whatever you call it could take him down. The ace looked at his lover once more and smiled. Yeah, after all, I did promise that I'd make sure he had a future. Asuma frowned. Hey now, don't go taking my brother. Yep, the protective brother was back in full swing. SakuAtsu looked out the window. All of the trees were bare, with the leaves showing their vibrant colors on the ground. While the season itself could easily be described as a season of death and loss, Atsumu looked towards Eden and Kita, smiling with tears in their eyes, seeing the blonde stir in his sleep. Autumn can also symbolize change. Never again would he let them slip away. Maybe he could take advantage of the season and invite the change in his life. He never thought of having more than one lovers, but he'd be willing to try it out. He placed his hand on top of Kita's, since he was the closest, and smiled through his mask, sending a deep blush decorating his cheeks. Welcome back, Atsu. He moved his mask and placed a soft kiss onto the blonde's forehead. Recovery will be rough, and even daunting, but everyone will be by his side to help him through it all. Atsumu wasn't alone, and he surely isn't going to die anytime soon. He is going to live. There, you guys got your alternative ending, so please don't be mad anymore. And yes, there was a little twist at the ending, yes. While I originally planned on this being just fluff, because it was going to be the alternative ending, which is going to be a happy ending, because the first ending was just angst. No fluff, just angst. However, my brain had different plans. So you got a lot of hurt comfort with a lot of hurt. Thank you so much for watching. As always, if you'd like to be kept up to date, check out any of my social medias. I hope that you all have a wonderful day or evening.